On her 18th birthday, Kathy Norton received two things: a lopsided chocolate cake from her aunt and an envelope that shattered her world. Inside was the official letter. Her inheritance had been claimed, transferred, gone. Kathy stared at the paper in disbelief, her fingers trembling. It was supposed to be hers, a fund left by her late mother who died when Kathy was just 6. The money had been protected until her 18th birthday, that day, that morning. But someone had beaten her to it. It didn't take long to find out who. Her legal guardians, her father's sister and brother-in-law, had filed fraudulent paperwork days earlier. They told the bank Kathy was mentally unstable, that she couldn't handle finances, that they had permission. Kathy, who had built her own budget spreadsheets at 12, who had aced her calculus class at 15, who had filed taxes for their entire household the year prior. They used her intelligence, then erased it. Now they drove a brand new car, booked vacations, renovated the kitchen. While Kathy sat in her tiny basement room, surrounded by unopened college brochures she could no longer afford. No one listened. The bank shrugged. "It's in process," the lawyer said. "These cases take years." And her aunt? She just smiled and said, "It's for your own good, sweetie." That night, Kathy didn't cry. She opened her old laptop, cracked from years of careful use, and got to work. Because what they didn't know, what no one ever cared enough to notice, was that Kathy wasn't just smart, she was a genius. The basement room was cold, but Kathy barely noticed as her fingers flew across the keyboard. The glow of the screen illuminated her determined face, casting eerie shadows on the water-stained walls. The house above was quiet. Aunt Vivian and Uncle Patrick had gone out to celebrate with her money while she was left alone on her birthday. Again. As she dug deeper into financial records, Kathy's mind flashed back to her mother's funeral, the feeling of her small hand in her father's, his grip so tight it almost hurt. He had promised to take care of her, but cancer had claimed him too just 2 years later. And then came the Morrisons, her father's sister and her husband, with their smiles that never reached their eyes and promises they never intended to keep. For 12 years, Kathy had endured their subtle cruelties. The forgotten school, events, the hand-me-downs despite their comfortable lifestyle, the casual remarks about her being a burden. She had counted down the days until her 18th birthday, when she would finally access the trust fund her mother had established, enough money for college and a fresh start away from them. Now that chance was gone, stolen by the very people who were supposed to protect her. Kathy pulled up another screen, her eyes narrowing as she followed the digital trail of her inheritance. $247,000 transferred to an account she'd never seen before, then immediately dispersed to various places. Down payment on a luxury SUV, vacation packages, home renovations. They hadn't even waited a full day before spending what had taken her mother a lifetime to save. If you're enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. "You look tired," Aunt Vivian remarked the next morning, sipping coffee from a mug that was part of a new set Kathy had seen delivered yesterday. "Did you sleep at all?" Kathy forced a neutral expression. "Not much. I was thinking about college. Applications." Vivian set down her mug, avoiding eye contact. "About that, Patrick and I have been discussing your future. College might not be the best path for you right now." Kathy's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Because of the money." Her aunt's smile tightened. "It's not just about money, dear. It's about what's best for you. We're thinking you could take some time to work, mature a bit. Maybe community college in a year or two." Behind Vivian, Uncle Patrick entered the kitchen, jingling the keys to his new SUV. "Morning, kiddo. Like the new cabinets? Brazilian teak." Kathy stared at the gleaming wood that her mother's money had bought. "They're nice," she said quietly, mentally adding the cabinet manufacturer to her growing list. Later that day, Kathy sat in the public library, using their computers instead of her own. She couldn't risk leaving any trails on her home network. She had spent years teaching herself financial forensics for fun. She had learned how banks worked, how credit flowed, how assets could be hidden or exposed. She also had full access to their digital lives. After all, she was the one who had set up their online accounts, organized their passwords, and helped them through every forgotten PIN moment. A librarian walked past, giving her a concerned look as Kathy hunched over printouts of banking, regulations and fraud reporting procedures. "School project," Kathy explained with a practiced smile that disappeared the moment the woman walked away. By closing time, she had a plan, not just to get her money back, but to ensure the Morrisons would never steal from anyone again. Could they really believe she would just accept this and move on? Did they think all those years of quiet compliance meant weakness? They were about to learn what happened when you cornered someone with nothing left to lose. What would Kathy do next to reclaim what was rightfully hers? And how far would her guardians go to keep their newfound wealth? The next day, Kathy waited until the house was empty before she began. First, she flagged suspicious activity in the account that held her inheritance. As the rightful owner, she filed a motion with the bank's fraud department. But instead of waiting, she created a chain of alerts across the financial system. Using open-source tools and security backdoors she had built herself over time. Her heart pounded as she worked, half expecting the door to fly open for someone to stop her. But no one came. No one ever checked on her. This invisibility, which had hurt her for so long, was now her greatest asset. By mid-afternoon, she had compiled a detailed report of every transaction made with her inheritance money, complete with timestamps, IP addresses, and signed documents that the Morrisons didn't realize she could access. She sent carefully worded emails to the financial fraud units of 3 different regulatory agencies, attaching anonymized portions of her evidence, just enough to spark an investigation without revealing her hand. Kathy hesitated before implementing the next phase of her plan. Was she going too far? Then she remembered Aunt Vivian's smirk when she'd asked about college, Uncle Patrick's casual dismissal of her future, the years of emotional neglect while they presented themselves to the world as saviors who had taken in their orphaned niece. No, she decided. This wasn't revenge, this was justice. She took a deep breath and executed the command that would freeze every credit card tied to her guardians' names. All of them. Then she waited. Kathy was setting the table for dinner when she heard the front door slam. Uncle Patrick stormed into the dining room, his face flushed with anger. "Fraud alert? What the hell is going on?" he demanded, throwing his wallet onto the table. Behind him, Aunt Vivian looked pale, clutching her designer purse. "I was standing there in front of everyone at Cartier, and my card was declined." "Declined," she hissed. "I had to leave the bracelet behind." Kathy kept her expression neutral. "Has she placed the last fork? That's strange. Maybe you should call the bank." "I did call them," Patrick shouted. "All our cards are frozen pending some kind of investigation. They mentioned something about unusual activity." His eyes narrowed suddenly. "You wouldn't know anything about this, would you?" Kathy met his gaze steadily. "Why would I? I don't have access to your accounts." The lie fell easily from her lips, even as her pulse quickened. For a moment, suspicion flickered across his face, but it faded quickly. After all, she was just Kathy. Quiet, compliant Kathy who never caused trouble. "It's probably identity theft," Vivian suggested, placing a hand on her husband's arm. "Remember that data breach last year?" Patrick nodded slowly. "You're right. I'll call our lawyer tomorrow." Kathy served the pasta she'd prepared, listening as they complained about their inconvenience, mentally checking off phase 1 of her plan. By morning, the $40,000 kitchen renovation would be flagged for payment investigation. The vacation to Greece would be cancelled mid-booking, and the SUV. She suppressed a smile as she imagined their faces when the repossession notice arrived. They had no idea what was coming. The Morrisons thought they were facing a minor financial hiccup, but Kathy knew they were about to encounter a tsunami of their own making. The following days unfolded exactly as Kathy had planned. The Morrisons' financial world began to crumble piece by piece. The bank called to inform them that there were irregularities in their recent transactions. The kitchen renovation company demanded immediate payment or threatened legal action. The car dealership sent a formal letter regarding the fraudulent financing application. Kathy watched her guardian's growing panic from the shadows, saying little, offering sympathetic nods when appropriate. "This is a nightmare," Vivian sobbed one evening, makeup streaking down her face. "They're saying we committed fraud. Fraud? We've never broken a law in our lives." Patrick paced the living room, his normally confident demeanor replaced by nervous agitation. "It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake." "What about my college fund?" Kathy asked quietly from the doorway. Both adults froze, exchanging a quick glance that confirmed everything. "What college fund?" Patrick replied too quickly. "Your mother's. Insurance barely covered the funeral costs." The boldness of the lie stunned Kathy, even though she'd expected it. "But the trust fund," she pressed, "the one that matured on my 18th birthday." Vivian's laugh was brittle. "Oh, sweetie, is that what you thought? There never was a trust fund. Your parents were terrible with money." Kathy felt a cold clarity wash over her. Any lingering doubts about her actions vanished in that moment. "That's strange," she said softly. "Because I have the original documents from the bank." She turned and walked back to her room, leaving them in stunned silence. Later that night, she heard them arguing in harsh whispers. She compiled a full report: evidence, transactions, false statements, IP addresses. She sent it to every regulatory body, to the bank's legal office, to the local news. And then one final envelope, to her guardians. Inside, a printed screenshot of their accounts, all frozen. A post-it note on top: "You taught me how to survive, not how to forgive." Have you ever known someone who was betrayed by those who should have protected them? How did they find the strength to stand up for themselves? Share your thoughts in the comments. The Morrisons' reaction was explosive and immediate. Kathy had barely made it to school the next morning when her phone began vibrating with text, messages and missed calls. By lunchtime, she had 37 notifications. She didn't read any of them. Instead, she sat in the library, watching the online banking portal as the Morrisons attempted, and failed, to transfer funds between accounts. Each transaction-denied notification filled her with grim satisfaction. When she finally returned, home Uncle Patrick was waiting at the kitchen table, his face an alarming shade of red. The envelope she had left lay open before him, its contents spread across the surface. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Kathy set down her backpack and faced him squarely. "I have done what any competent adult would do when they discover fraud. I reported it." "This isn't a game, Catherine," he hissed, rising from his chair. "Do you have any idea what you've started? They're talking about criminal charges." "I know exactly what I've started," she replied calmly. "And you know exactly what you did." Aunt Vivian appeared in the doorway, her eyes puffy from crying. "We were protecting you," she insisted. "We were going to tell you when you were ready." Kathy laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Ready? I was ready at 12, when I created a budget spreadsheet for the household. I was ready at 15 when I aced calculus. I was ready every single day that you treated me like a burden instead of family." Patrick's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "We can fix this," he said, lowering his voice. "We'll say it was a misunderstanding. We'll transfer the money back to you. No one needs to go to jail." For a brief moment, Kathy felt a flicker of pity. They still didn't understand. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't something they could smooth over with empty promises and manipulative tactics. This was the consequence of 12 years of neglect, culminating in the theft of her future. "It's too late," she said simply. "The authorities already have everything they need." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, they could see the silhouettes of two people standing on the porch. "I believe that's for you," Kathy said, stepping aside as Patrick moved woodlessly toward the door. The investigators from the Financial Crimes Unit had arrived right on schedule. The tipping point came unexpectedly, not through the legal system, but through the court of public opinion. Kathy had been careful in her communications with the local news, providing just enough information to spark interest without directly involving herself. But someone at the bank had leaked the full story. Teen genius exposes inheritance scam on 18th birthday. The headline spread like wildfire across social media. By the time Kathy arrived at school the following Monday, Everyone knew. Teachers gave her sympathetic looks. Classmates who had barely noticed her existence suddenly wanted to sit with her at lunch. Even the principal called her into his office to awkwardly offer support. "The university admissions office called," he told her, clearing his throat nervously. "They've heard about your situation. They want to talk to you about a potential scholarship." Kathy blinked in surprise. This was an unexpected development, a positive one amid the chaos. At home, the atmosphere had become unbearable. The Morrisons alternated between pleading for her to recant her statements and threatening vague consequences if she didn't. They were facing not only criminal investigation, but also complete social ostracism. Friends didn't return calls. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. Their carefully cultivated image of respectability had shattered overnight. That evening, as Kathy sat at her computer reviewing emails from 3 different lawyers who had offered to represent her pro bono, a soft knock came at her door. Aunt Vivian stood there looking somehow smaller than before. "The bank called," she said, her voice hollow. "They're restoring your funds tomorrow and—" She hesitated. "The district attorney wants to meet with us in the morning." Kathy nodded, unsurprised. The wheels of justice were turning exactly as she had anticipated. "I know this will sound meaningless to you," Vivian continued, "but we didn't start out intending to take everything. It was just going to be a small portion for all we'd done for you. But then Patrick saw how much there was and—" Her voice trailed off. Kathy studied the woman who had been her guardian for 12 years, searching for any sign of the aunt who had once brought her ice cream when she had the flu, or who had attended her 5th-grade science fair. Those small kindnesses had faded, so gradually that Kathy had almost forgotten they had ever existed. "Did you ever really care about me at all?" she asked suddenly. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "I did. I do. But somewhere along the way, resentment took over. Your mother had everything, my brother's love, financial security, and you. After they died, we got stuck with the responsibility, but none of the resources. It wasn't fair. So you took what was mine," Kathy finished for her, "because life wasn't fair to you." Vivian had no answer for that. Could the Morrisons ever make amends for their betrayal? Or was the damage to their relationship beyond repair? 2 weeks later, Kathy was sitting across from a bank executive. "We've reviewed everything," the woman said carefully. "Your guardians committed fraud. Your inheritance will be restored in full, and there may be charges filed against them." Kathy nodded. Her expression didn't change. Not when they apologized. Not when the money returned. Because she hadn't done this for revenge. She did it because they stole her mother's final gift, and no one was going to get away with that. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of expedited processing to ensure Kathy would have access to her funds immediately. As she left the imposing bank building, stepping into the bright Chicago sunlight, Kathy felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in years, she could breathe freely. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma, a classmate who had recently appointed herself Kathy's unofficial best friend. "How did it go?" "Coffee after." Kathy smiled slightly. Another unexpected outcome of this ordeal, people actually seeing her, not as the quiet orphan living in the Morrisons' basement, but as someone worth knowing. "All good. Meet you at grounds." "In 20, she replied. At the coffee shop, Kathy found not just Emma waiting, but also Mr. Reyes, her computer science teacher. "Hope you don't mind," Emma said. "Mr. Reyes wanted to talk to you about something." The teacher leaned forward, an excited gleam in his eyes. "I have a connection at Northwestern's cybersecurity department. I showed them some of your work, anonymously, of course, and they were impressed, very impressed. They want to meet you." Kathy felt a flutter of excitement. Northwestern had been her dream school before the Morrisons had stolen her inheritance. Now it seemed possible again. "There's an information session next weekend," Mr. Reyes continued. "I could drive you there, introduce you to some people." "I'd like that," Kathy said, surprised by the emotion welling in her throat. As they discussed potential majors and career paths, Kathy's phone rang. The caller ID showed Morrison Residence. She silenced it without a second thought. Whatever they wanted to say, it could wait. For once, her future came first. The district attorney's office was busier than Kathy had expected, filled with harried-looking people clutching folders and speaking in hushed tones. She sat stiffly on an uncomfortable plastic chair, waiting for her name to be called. Beside her, Mr. Hoffman, one of the pro bono lawyers who had reached out to her, reviewed documents on his tablet. "Remember," he said without looking up, "you're not obligated to accept any deal they propose. This meeting is exploratory only." Kathy nodded, though anxiety churned in her stomach. Despite her confidence in her evidence, there was still a part of her that feared the system would somehow fail her, that the Morrisons' respectable facade and community standing would outweigh her documented proof. When the assistant finally called her name, Kathy was led into a conference room where 3 people waited: the district attorney, a victim's advocate, and, surprisingly, a family court representative. "Ms. Norton," the DA began, "thank you for coming in today. I understand this is a difficult situation." Kathy straightened her shoulders. "I'm fine. I just want my inheritance secured and proper consequences for fraud." The DA nodded approvingly. "Direct. I appreciate that." She opened a folder. "Your documentation was extraordinary. Most fraud cases don't come to us so thoroughly prepared." Kathy felt a small flicker of pride. "The Morrisons have been interviewed extensively," the DA continued. "They've admitted to the fraud, though they characterize it as a misunderstanding about their rights as guardians." Mr. Hoffman scoffed quietly beside her. "Given their lack of prior criminal history and the full restoration of your funds, they've been offered a plea deal that includes restitution, probation, and community service, but no jail time." Kathy considered this. Part of her wanted them to suffer as she had suffered, but another part, a growing part, simply wanted to move forward. "What about my living situation?" she asked. "I'm 18 now, but I'm still in high school for another 2 months. This was where the family court representative leaned forward. "That's why I'm here. We have some options to discuss about your immediate housing needs." By the end of the meeting, a weight had lifted from Kathy's shoulders. She would move into a small university-affiliated apartment near her high school, her rent covered by a portion of her restored inheritance. The Morrisons would face public humiliation, financial penalties, and the loss of certain professional licenses, consequences that would follow them for years. But most importantly, Kathy would be free. As she left the building, her phone pinged. With an email notification, the subject line read, "Northwestern University Early Admission Interview Request." Could this be the fresh start Kathy had been fighting for all along? Kathy stood at the threshold of her new apartment, key in hand, barely able to believe it was real. The studio was small but bright, with a kitchenette along one wall and a Murphy bed that could be tucked away during the day. Best of all, it was hers alone, a space where no one could control her comings and goings or make her feel unwelcome. Emma helped carry in the last of Kathy's meager belongings, mostly books and clothes packed in second-hand suitcases. "It's perfect," Emma declared, flopping onto the single armchair by the window. "Total independence," Kathy smiled, running her hand along the clean countertop. "I keep expecting someone to tell me I can't have this." Moving out of the Morrisons' house had been surprisingly anticlimactic. Uncle Patrick had been absent, meeting with his lawyer. Aunt Vivian had hovered awkwardly, offering half-hearted assistance that Kathy politely declined. The final moment had been a stiff goodbye at the front door, with Vivian pressing an envelope into Kathy's hand. "Some photos of your parents," she had explained. "I should have given them to you years ago." It was the closest thing to an apology Kathy had received. Now, as the afternoon sunlight streamed through her new windows, Kathy began unpacking her computer equipment. The Northwestern interview was in 3 days, and she wanted to be prepared. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Reyes. "Got you that internship interview at the cybersecurity firm, next Friday at 2. Proud of you, kid." Opportunities were unfolding before her like flowers after a long winter. When the news story broke about her case, it went viral. Teen genius exposes inheritance scam on 18th birthday. They stole her future. She took down their entire lifestyle. People cheered, commented, shared. Some called her cold, but they didn't know the night she cried alone. The birthdays passed without celebration, the way her heart had to harden just to survive. As Emma helped her arrange books on a small shelf, Kathy realized something had shifted inside her. The anger that had fueled her through the past few weeks was subsiding, making room for something else. Hope, perhaps. Or maybe just the quiet satisfaction of having fought for herself when no one else would. The Northwestern University campus sprawled before Kathy, its Gothic buildings rising majestically against the clear blue sky. She clutched her portfolio tighter, trying to calm her racing heart as she followed the campus map toward the computer science department. This was the interview that could change everything, a special admission consideration based on her extraordinary circumstances and demonstrated aptitude, as the email had phrased it. Inside the department building, Kathy was greeted by Dr. Eleanor Chen, a woman whose research on financial cybersecurity Kathy had followed for years. "Ms. Norton," Dr. Chen said warmly, extending her hand, "I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your situation has created quite a stir in our department." Kathy winced slightly. "I hope that's not a bad thing." "On the contrary," Dr. Chen replied, leading her down a hallway lined with research posters. "What you accomplished, tracing financial fraud and documenting it so meticulously that it led to immediate action. That's precisely the kind of analytical thinking we value here." The interview that followed was unlike anything Kathy had expected. Instead of dwelling on her grades or extracurriculars, Dr. Chen and two other professors engaged her in a discussion about financial security protocols, ethical hacking, and the future of digital forensics. When they presented her with a hypothetical security breach scenario, Kathy's nervous tension dissolved as she sketched out a potential solution on the whiteboard. "Impressive approach," one of the professors remarked. "Most applicants would have overlooked that vulnerability entirely." By the time the interview concluded, Kathy felt a growing certainty that she had found her place, not just a college, but a community that valued her mind. As Dr. Chen walked her out, she paused in the lobby. "We normally don't do this, but given your circumstances," she handed Kathy an envelope. "Your acceptance package, full scholarship, including housing. We'd like you to join our undergraduate. A research team starting this summer." Kathy stared at the envelope, momentarily speechless. Dr. Chen smiled. "The world needs more young people who don't just accept injustice, Ms. Norton. We need those who have the skills and courage to expose it." Walking back through campus, Kathy found herself stopping beneath a massive oak tree, its branches creating a canopy of dappled sunlight. She sat on a nearby bench and carefully opened the envelope, running her fingers over the embossed acceptance letter. For the first time since her parents died, the future stretched before her, bright, full of possibility, and entirely her own. Will Kathy find the home and family she's been missing all these years at Northwestern, or will the shadows of her past continue to haunt her new beginning? The days leading up to high school graduation passed in a blur of final exams and apartment decorating. Kathy had begun her internship at FinSecure, a cybersecurity firm that specialized in protecting financial institutions, work that was challenging and rewarding in equal measure. Her tiny apartment had slowly transformed from a bare-bones shelter to an actual home, with second-hand furniture carefully selected from thrift stores and a wall of photographs, some from the envelope Aunt Vivian had given her, others new ones, with Emma and classmates who had recently entered her life. The media attention had mostly faded, though occasionally a journalist would reach out for a follow-up story. Kathy declined these requests politely but firmly. She had said all she needed to say. The morning of graduation, Kathy stood before her mirror in her blue cap and gown, barely recognizing herself. Not just because of the formal attire, but because of the confident young woman who gazed back at her. Gone was the hunched posture and averted eyes that had been her armor for so many years. "Ready for this?" Emma called from the kitchenette, where she was making celebratory French toast. "As I'll ever be," Kathy replied, adjusting her honor cords. There would be speeches and awards, and, according to Mr. Reyes, a special acknowledgement of her Northwestern scholarship. What no one knew was that Kathy had made a difficult decision the night before. After weeks of ignoring their calls and text messages, she had finally responded to the Morrisons. They would be attending the graduation ceremony, not seated with her but present. It wasn't forgiveness, not exactly, but it was a recognition that carrying anger forever would only weigh her down. As they entered the school auditorium, Kathy spotted them immediately, sitting stiffly near the back, both looking older somehow. Uncle Patrick nodded awkwardly when he caught her eye. Aunt Vivian offered a tentative smile. Kathy acknowledged, them with a small nod before taking her place with the other graduates. When her name was called to receive her diploma, a cheer went up from the front row where Emma, Mr. Reyes, and several other teachers had gathered. But there was also a quieter applause from the back of the room. Kathy accepted her diploma, turned to the audience, and allowed herself one moment of pure, untarnished pride. This victory belonged to her alone. "You didn't have to meet with us," Aunt Vivian said, hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. They sat in a cafe near the school, an hour after the graduation ceremony had ended. Kathy had surprised even herself by extending the invitation. "No," she agreed, "I didn't." Uncle Patrick looked down at the table, the confident bluster that had defined him completely absent now. "We wanted to say congratulations," he said finally. "Northwestern it's incredible, Kathy." "Thank you," she replied simply. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. "And we wanted to apologize," Vivian added, her voice catching. "What we did was unforgivable. We've been in therapy since everything happened, trying to understand why we did it." Kathy studied them carefully. The Morrisons looked diminished somehow. Patrick's designer clothes replaced by an off-the-rack suit, Vivian's carefully maintained appearance showing signs of neglect. Their legal penalties had clearly taken a financial toll, but it was more than that. There was a humility in their demeanor that had never existed before. "I'm not looking for apologies," Kathy said finally. "I just wanted you to know that I'm going to be okay despite everything." Patrick nodded, blinking rapidly. "Your parents would be proud," he said softly. "We never told you enough about them. How brilliant your mother was. How kind your father could be, even to people who didn't deserve it." Something tightened in Kathy's chest at the mention of her parents. There had been so few people in her life who could share memories of them. Despite everything, the Morrisons had that connection to her past. "Maybe someday," she heard herself saying, "we can talk about them." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe not ever completely, but it was a door left slightly ajar instead of firmly locked. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Vivian hesitated, then reached into her purse. "We found this when we were packing up some things," she said, handing Kathy a small velvet pouch. "It was your mother's. We should have given it to you years. Hergo." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small book with the word stories engraved on its cover. Kathy remembered it instantly. Her mother had worn it every day. "She always said our lives were stories we were writing," Vivian explained, "that we could change the narrative whenever we wanted." As Kathy fastened the bracelet around her wrist, she felt a sense of completion. Her mother's final gift hadn't just been the inheritance. It had been this lesson, that she had the power to write her own story, even when others tried to dictate the plot. And now? Now she would study finance and cybersecurity at the university her guardians said she wasn't ready for. With her own money, in her own name. They had underestimated her mind, they had underestimated her silence, and in doing so, they had handed her the greatest weapon of all, a reason to fight. Congratulations, type 9 in the comments, so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.